Welcome back for another advanced English story at a moderate speed. Today's story tells of a man who lived by the forest and kept seeing strange rocks appear on his porch. Make sure to look up every unknown word to expand your English vocabulary. Alright, let's get started. Bill had lived on the edge of the forest for almost a year, and he was familiar with the daily rhythms. He knew when the wind usually picked up, when the deer crossed the lower field, and when the neighbor's old truck rattled down the gravel road. Nothing surprised him anymore, or so he thought. But then something different happened. It was a Tuesday evening in late fall, and the sun turned the sky pink before everything went dark. Bill was finishing his dinner when he heard a sound outside. It wasn't loud, but it was distinct. It was a single, sharp knock. He froze. No one ever came to his house without calling first. His closest neighbor lived about a half-mile away, and the mail carrier never arrived this late, so he had no idea who could have caused the sound. Bill set down his fork and listened. The knock didn't repeat. Instead, he heard something softer like a slow, deliberate scrape along the wooden porch. He stood up, walked to the window, and pulled the curtain back just enough to see outside. The porch light was on, but it illuminated only a small circle. Beyond that, everything was in pure darkness. No movement was heard, and no silhouette was seen. Bill stood at his door for a moment and then slowly opened it a few centimeters. Cold air rushed in against his face. "Hello?" he called out. There was nothing but silence. He then stepped outside and looked around. The porch boards were damp from the evening mist, but near the railing he noticed something unusual. It was a small pile of stones. He counted 5 stones that were smooth, round, and arranged in a perfect line. He hadn't placed them there, so he stood wondering how they had gotten there. He picked one up. It was slightly warm, as if someone had been holding it moments earlier. A sudden rustle came from the trees. Bill turned quickly, but again he saw nothing except the dark outline of the forest on the edge of his property. He went back inside, locked the door, and tried to convince himself it was nothing. Maybe it was just a kid from down the road. Maybe a raccoon or some other animal had knocked something over. But the placement of the stones and their warmth made no sense. Bill slept lightly that night. The next morning, Bill walked the perimeter of his property. He expected to find footprints or signs of someone passing through, but the ground was completely undisturbed. He didn't see any tire tracks or boot prints. He only saw the usual pine needles and fallen branches scattered on the ground. He had almost convinced himself that he had imagined the whole thing until he reached the far corner of the yard. There, resting on top of the fence post, was another stone. It was smooth, round, and warm. Bill felt a chill run down his spine. He looked into the forest. The trees stood silently, but he felt watched. He picked up the stone and slipped it into his pocket. He didn't know why, but maybe picking it up gave him a sense of power over the mystery. That afternoon, Bill called his neighbor, Jane, who had lived in the area for decades. "Has anyone been wandering around lately?" he asked. "Not that I've heard of," she said. "Why?" Bill hesitated. "Someone left stones on my porch last night, and there was another one this morning." Jane was quiet for a moment. That seems a little odd." "Yes, it's really weird." "Well," she said slowly, "there used to be a man who lived out there before you moved in. He was a little odd in general. He didn't like people crossing his land, and he used to leave stones as warnings." "Warnings?" Bill asked. "Yes, but not threats," she said quickly. "Just warning signals. It was his way of saying he'd been there. But he passed away years ago. No one's seen anything like that since." Bill felt a strange mix of relief and unease. If the man was gone, then who had left the stones, he wondered. That evening, Bill sat on the porch with a cup of tea, determined not to be startled again. The sky darkened slowly, and the forest faded into darkness. He listened carefully, trying to hear any unusual sound. For a long time, nothing happened. Then, just as he was about to go inside, he heard footsteps. They were soft and steady, and they came from the trees. Bill stood up and shouted, "Who's there?" The footsteps stopped. Then he took a few steps toward the edge of the porch. "I know someone's out there," he said. A voice finally answered that was quiet and unfamiliar. "I didn't mean to frighten you," the voice said. Bill's heart pounded. "Show yourself, then." A figure emerged from the trees. It was a man in his late 30s, wearing a dark jacket and carrying a small canvas bag. His expression was calm, almost apologetic. "I'm sorry," the man said. "I should have knocked properly." "I was honestly a little confused," Bill said. "You made sounds and set rocks around, but didn't stay to talk to me." The man nodded. "Yes, I wasn't sure if you'd want company." Bill examined him. "What were the stones for?" The man looked down, embarrassed. "They were for my brother. He used to live here, and I come by sometimes to feel close to him. I didn't know someone else had moved in." Bill felt the tension in his shoulders ease. "Your brother would leave signals like this?" "Yes," the man said. "He had his own way of communicating, and I guess I picked up the habit." Bill exhaled slowly. "You could have just said hello." "I know," the man said, "but I wasn't ready yet." The two stood quietly for a moment, and the forest behind them rustled softly. "You're welcome to visit," Bill finally said, "but maybe without creating such suspense next time." The man smiled. "Fair enough." He stepped back toward the trees. "I'll come by in daylight next time and knock properly if I want to say hi." Bill nodded. "I'd appreciate that." The man disappeared into the forest, and the night grew still again. Bill sat back down, feeling the strange mixture of fear and understanding settle into something peaceful. The forest no longer felt threatening. It felt inhabited by memories, people, and stories he had yet to learn. He reached into his pocket and held the warm stone for a moment before setting it gently on the porch railing. He smiled and went into his house to enjoy the rest of the evening. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed today's story. Make sure to press like on this video if you want more content like this to learn English. I'm also happy to include specific vocabulary in future stories, so feel free to type difficult English words in the comments below for me to use next time. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.